So thanks for everyone for joining us today. Wanted to take a few moments to go through some of our things in the most recent releases, just to kind of give you some ideas of what's come down the pike, what's coming down, and give you those items. So today, as we put in there, we want to talk about transferring negative balances to AR, because if you remember right, over a while ago, we'd turned that off. We'd put the manual balances in, but then we didn't have some ways. So kind of as we went through, we've cleaned up the ability to move balances to AR as a negative balances. Also going to talk about removing card details briefly, as well as some things that come in for translations for people that want to use translations. And then another couple things that go in on billing and a few things coming that way. So kind of taking these in some order of looking at accounts receivable, I've got some different things. One of the biggest things that we had the opportunity of is that if I looked in our accounts receivable section and I have my lovely company here, my example company, with their lovely $8,225 bill here in AR goes through here. I only have the ability to do payments directly here or do adjustments to a folio. So if you remember a couple releases back, we had pushed in that ability that you could actually make a direct manual post charges here and make changes to that. So I still have that ability to come in and say, oh, I need to remove room charges, and say I'll just use my adjust room and say that I needed to take $100 off, and if I had anything that way, it will make those corrections, but it wasn't allowing us to transfer credit balances. So like I made that simple adjustment, but if I'd had somebody who maybe made a payment on an account, so I'm going to go over and switch to a slightly different tab and go to my credit amount of this. I had an account that was set up, and my team, somebody on the hotel, had gone through and had put a check payment that came in and put this on the account. Previously, we did not have a way to move this to payments or move this to the AR and go from there. And in this last release, we did that. So what we can do is we can simply do, just like if this was a debit amount, we could move the same thing, but I can move this credit amount by saying, go ahead, I need to move this to a direct bill. Now, this account does have to have the company attached to it. So this is still going to my company account here. So you see example company. And if I send this to direct bill, I can say, yes, pay it by direct bill. It's going to go from there. We have closed that off. It's not going to let us do fun things that way. Because we've closed this, it's not going to let us make any other changes and things that way. I'm going to let this refresh. And it has moved my credit amount to AR over here as my example. Now, this is a two-step process, and I'm going to show you one other thing after I show this to it. We've moved this credit amount to AR, but I still can't necessarily allocate this back through there. So what I want to do is if I expand it, I can have this option when it is a credit amount to move to credit. So if I click the action of move to credit, it is moving it, and it has now moved that item over into my items here in my AR manual to credit. So I'd done a couple different things, but here was my manual credit. We'd moved it over. It was a check payment, and I can now use these items to allocate it back out and say, yes, I need to allocate $17.89 because that was what was paid, and I can use that as a payment to go from there. So we've made that ability to move over there. Now, there are two things to know in setting that up. Is that while that is the step, we do need to do one item to set that up. And in our settings again, if we go to our financials area, the financials area is going to allow us in charge codes to create a one-time code that will allow this. And I've already got it created, so it's not going to let me do it again. But if I tried to come in and say I want to use transaction and to AR manual credit, I'm going to go through here. I can put it in my payments or anything else that way. I have the option for AR manual credit. It will only allow me to add one, and I've already added one. If I try to add a second, it will give me an error code. So I have this if you go through and go that way. So you can add it in there. I'm not going to do that since I've done that. And at the same time, it will not show in your transaction codes. It's not something that you're going to be able to see for general use. You will see it in the financial setups in accounts receivable. Just like we have the the manual balance charge code that we set up for moving things over for transition hotels, we will see the transaction code that was created for the manual credit charge. And so it is here. Once it's created, it goes in this area automatically. You don't have to need anything to do it. You just need to build the transaction code out originally. So that's going to allow us to move those credit balances over to AR and then apply those as payments and let them set up. So we can do that. And if you have other existing items in a that are in a AR account and are set as a credit balance, you can already move those over once that transaction code is set up. So that's the first thing to talk about in AR and going from there. The second thing that we did set up as well, and this came out 2 releases ago, but I've been liking to put it in there, is, let me get to my correct folio here, is that we have the ability to delete bill windows. So if I go into this reservation that I have a reservation that's set up, that's in-house, and if I go to my bill and charges, you will notice that we have 3 tabs going through here. I have bill 1 that has nothing, I have bill 2 that has this, actually let me put in my payment method, not that it makes a huge difference right now, but we'll just say it's going to be cash. It lets us go there, and I have a bill, and this has a balance, and I have bill 3 that has nothing on it. So we have set up the rules, and notice that now we have this X. It will allow us to close things out and delete these or remove them and hide them and go from there. If there is a payment on here, as you'll notice, or anything else, any charges, it will not let us move them. As well, if I actually move this back to window 1, just so we have it, it will also, even though once this is cleared out, it won't let me close out bill 2 unless I've also closed out and hidden bill 3. So once I've closed bill 3, it will hide it and go from there. And then when this bill is also as well has nothing, I can get rid of that one as well. So it does have to have there are a couple rules around it. There cannot be any charges on the bill. There can't be any routing restrictions. So if I had actually set this up instead and just as a separate side said that I'm going to send room and tax over there, and we'll just put in a credit card there that I've got room and tax, same thing goes, it's going to set up bill 2, it's going from there. Because I've got routing to it, even though there are no charges here, I cannot delete this bill out and hide it. We will go through and we can bring the bill back too, but the other thing that we do have as well, just for information if things got deleted or moved around, is that we do still have in the activity log, we have put in things that we've hidden the bill. So we can say that it's been hidden and then we created a new bill. So we do track it if somebody went through and got those and removed those out. So that's kind of the second thing, and I know different people have asked about that at different times. So we wanted to go from there. The other thing that we have started moving down the process, and this is kind of going to be a 2-step item, and I kind of mentioned that because we've moved the first step that came out in our most recent release was removing guest card data. And to do that, we did a couple different things. In our front desk section, we added a new section here of guests, and guests will allow you to come in and do a couple different things. You can search by your existing guests that are already there. So if I went in and I searched for a particular guest by last name, I'm going to find all of the things that have that. Without going into a reservation process, it will let me see guests that are there. And as well, if I wanted to, I do have the ability to make a direct guest card and create a new guest card for somebody without having to go through the reservation process. So if you had those VIPs or ownership entity type people that you wanted to put there and put comments in, so you didn't have to get things there, there is now a way to create a profile and guest card for them without creating a reservation. And secondly, we can then search for them and make changes to it. The second feature that goes in there, I have to remember one, is that we have the ability that in the first step we've done some things to say that we want to have the ability to remove their data. And this is really in some guest privacy portions to look at, is that if I go into a particular card and I have an address, we'll just put 8120 Woodmont. I'm going on the basis that all of this would have already been filled out and everything else that way. If we have information in here, if I've got an email address, any of these things that are in here, so using that idea that people want to be able to, A, be removed from systems and or B, be able to have their items stripped out if we've had them stay here. So for privacy and marketing purposes, we have offered this new item in this area that says manage card. And at this point, there is only one option. It is remove details. And what we'll do is that as long as there's not future reservations or an open folio, will let us remove the details. And by clicking remove details, it is going to automatically take out any email addresses, phone numbers, address data, things like that. It will keep the first name and it will anonymize the last name. So you'll see that we still have a first name and we still have a last initial. So that's going to allow us, if you had something that stayed, something came through, it was a billing item, it was a group item, any of those types of things, that you will still be able to see the base data of the guest, but you're not going to see the full information of it. And the other item that goes from there at the same time is that if you are looking at your guest list and we looked at somebody, we do have that direct ability here from this, as the other change is to go into a new reservation. So if you were modifying and updating these things, you could make a new reservation. And then the last thing that comes with it, as I mentioned, things that are coming down the road in the near future is, as of today, we have the remove details. Going forward in the next release or two, we will have finalized it out, is that there will be the ability to delete guest cards out. So as long as there's not any future reservations and things that way, there will be the ability to delete it. As well, the last thing that's coming down, and I think it's a little further out, but it is coming through that idea, is the ability to merge profiles as well, so that when you have things that may have been made by the OTA and things that were made direct and different things that way, the ability to merge guest profiles is coming down the road for you. So that goes that, and all of those fun things. And we will open mics shortly here for questions on any of that. The last thing I wanted to talk about today, actually the last two things to talk about, is languages. For those of you that have different languages and or want to support and go from there, we have started building out more items for languages to show items in guest-facing items in different languages. So those are things like the confirmation letter, the invoices, rooming lists for guests, the group rooming list if you use that, cancellation letters, AR statements. There are a couple steps for it. Some of the fields we have automatically translated things for, so arrival dates, all of those types of things we've had. But we do need to have you set things up, and we don't auto-translate everything for you. In the hotel and staff page setup, we have this option here for languages in the lower right-hand corner. And if we click in languages, we will see the different languages that we have set up right now that are out there, so we can say what you're using and going from there. And you can click multiple languages that you want to use and go from there. Once those languages are set up, you need to get and make the changes in stationery. So when you go to stationery, I can look at it and I see the select language in the upper right-hand corner here that allows me to say, which do I need to work with? I can either work with English and update these items, or I could work in Spanish and update these items. And through here, we have all of the different places that we can do. So we can come in here and put in a whole series of Spanish language terms and conditions. So it has that information in here. It will automatically pull over the initial English or your initial language that's there. So you do need to go through and update it. It will not translate automatically. And the other item that's in here, just as an example to see, if you notice, this has all HTML markup language. You can use these terms and conditions in HTML. I'm not personally very good at writing HTML. What you can utilize, one of the websites I've used over the time is a website called wordhtml.com, which lovingly lets you take a Word document you've written up and marked and put in all of your bolding and underline and anything else that you want to do that way. Put it in there and transfer it over to a HTML format and then copy and paste that information here. So you do need to make those updates and changes. Same things with same ideas for invoices. I can put in and translate it and say, here is my folio from my recent stay. Anything I want to put in those guest email bodies and everything else that way. So those fields are translatable and allow you to drive those translations for it. It is not an auto-translate for you, just so you know. So use your team members that may speak and write perfectly and go from there. You may use Google Translate, I've used for a couple times, but know that there are always opportunities with that. But there is the ability to do that language translation. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is just a couple things coming up down the road in the next couple releases. And I think it's a big one to say where we're really we're starting over the next, I'm going to say 4 releases. So realistically, over the next 3 months, we are going to start making major changes in reports, adding more things that will be exportable, some things that way. But the bigger thing is pushing them more to background run batches. So things that sometimes we've had people go through that say, we'll say they tried to run a report for a longer period of time and it times out and doesn't let them go through it. We're moving some of those report items to the background and allowing those to run in the background and then pull them up that way. So it will kind of go some things there from that item. And that's kind of the big thing that's going to be booked on there, as well as a few other items. The confirmation button, the same idea. If I'm looking, sorry, the question that came out was, will it be an easier way to send a confirmation? If I'm in the initial reservation, it will always give me the opportunity to send the confirmation, but the same thing will happen if I'm sending a confirmation in an alternate email or anything else. That way, if I go to a booking here in there, on my confirmation tab, all I'm going to do is say which language do I need to send my confirmation in, and it will send it off in what's translated and available for my hotel. I hope that helps and answers that question.